Okay, with your team of ministers, have you put together a coalition of inclusive government, or have you basically silenced the opposition? The best way to silence your critics is to promote them, isn't it?
I hadn't actually thought about it that way. Thank you for the tip. No, my take is I wanted a different approach to last time round, and that is, yes, I'd rather have disagreements around the table, but we've had the opportunity to have those discussions, rather than people forever saying you haven't involved us and all that type of thing. And the nature of the assembly, in fact, one of the best bits of advice I had on day one when I went in end of 2005, was ignore what you've read at that point in the media. Social media wasn't particularly that prevalent at that point. Deal with people how they deal with you. And to an extent, bar possibly one or two exceptions, generally, in fact, I think almost certainly without any exceptions, there will be points in the last 12 and a half years that I have agreed with all individuals in the assembly, and they've agreed with me. So not all at the same time, obviously.
Yeah.
And the point there is, you have a pool of people you have to work with, and I think that's one of the experiences you get. You will disagree on other areas, but if you can come to an agreement on certain areas, and sometimes it's actually in identifying that there is a problem. You won't necessarily agree on the solution, but if you can agree on what the problem is, then you're halfway through to get to resolving it. And I think that's hopefully my stance going forward, is that, if you've got that, I don't like the word diversity of views, but that range of views, hopefully, although it'll be harder work probably, we'll get a better product, if you like, because we've got different viewpoints feeding into it at an early stage.
But looking at it from my angle, for instance, I mean, yourself as a backbencher on Scrutiny was second to none. I think your Scrutiny, you're a fantastic scrutineer. Let's keep it right. I don't always agree with you politically, but credit where it's due as a scrutineer. You were great. Jeff Southern, one of the best scrutineers there were. Monty Taddia, Sam Mezek, fantastic scrutineers. So now, for instance, who's the opposition? Because there's no one, there's only, if you like, Judy Martin, another fantastic scrutineer. You've got all them on board now. Mm-hmm. So who is left with any experience to scrutinise what you lot are doing?
Well, I think you'll find there are existing members who've been in there for some time who are still on scrutiny, and I think actually the new members coming in will find their feet pretty rapidly. They've got a good team of officers behind them. That's speaking from my experience, and no, they will hold us to account.
So who is the opposition in the States now?
I don't like the word opposition, to be honest. Don't forget, it's meant to be that scrutiny has always been the critical friend, and therefore it's going to be a case of, as items come through, do people think there are fundamental issues with them? That will be the purpose of scrutiny. Or actually, do they think they're reasonable? I'm hoping that if we've got the team we've got in place, we'll hopefully be producing, in general, some things that most people will be able to go along with. We will find out in 3 or 6 months' time, won't we?
Well, that's right. It's because, from a skeptic's point of view, we're thinking, well, look, what you've done here is got all the opposition on board. Reform Jersey were the only political party were the opposition, but now they're sort of government. They're part. Are they part of the establishment? I don't know. Is it fair to say? Is it fair to call them this? Is it fair to call you guys the establishment? I think you're going to
have to ask that question to them, to be honest. I think the main point is, given the nature of a lot of the individuals around the table, council ministers and the assistant ministers as well, I cannot conceive if something is fundamentally wrong that they won't be thumping the table. I think you will see, certainly my view is that assistant ministers, we've got rid of collective responsibility anyway, and I think hopefully going back to that model, and I was one, and Judy Martin was one, and there were others, where even though we were assistant ministers in the past, we did still challenge the council ministers on various things that were coming through. I suspect that will still be there, and I think from the assistant ministers and from the ministers around the table, I think that's healthy.
Well, again, we have to wait and see, but I hope it is the inclusive government. Let's hope so. I was interviewed Children's Minister a couple of days ago, and he said basically was telling me that everything's roses, everything's lovely in the Council of Ministers. Can we really believe that? Surely there must be some head banging and head knocking and.
Well, to date, the reason I'm smiling is it is quite interesting. To date, the feedback I'm getting and that I'm seeing is that we're getting a lot of ministers with different perspectives. They're having the opportunity to express those views, and we're working together to bring out, to bring those views together, I suppose. Obviously, it is early days. There'll be no doubt points as things progress where things will get difficult. There's bound to be some challenging situations ahead, and we'll see how we manage each of those. At the moment, on things like I keep using the word strategic plan, that's actually the common strategic policy, I think. It's a set of objectives, if you like, and I think from that point of view, people are actually more aligned on certain areas than actually they probably first thought.
Okay, we'll see. I want to go on to the Children's Minister. Senator Sam Mezek has agreed to adopt the media guidelines suggested by the National Association of People Abused in Childhood, NAPAC, and use the term non-recent as opposed to historic when referring to child abuse. Will you commit to adopting this less derogatory and offensive terminology also?
Sorry, I wasn't aware of that one. I have no issue with that at all.
That's lovely to hear. What can we, the penultimate question, what can we, the public, expect from your government that we haven't had already in other governments? What's going to be so different to yours to what we've seen in the previous government and the government before that?
I think the difficulty is going to be around, so we'll just wait falls on the interruption, I guess. The difficulty is going to be around distinguish between the output versus how we get there. Now, and by that I mean, sorry, my train of thought's just completely gone from somebody knocking on the door. Anyway, for the purposes of the camera. So I would hope we're going to see our council ministers that are going to work better together. And therefore, and also as I've been very keen on, is to make sure that involvement at an early stage includes a wider interaction with backbenchers and stakeholders, and a horrible expression, but other people outside the Assembly, just to make sure we get that wider contact and that sort of buy-in of what we're trying to do. If you look at the issues, and I think it's been very clear, things like mental health, things like affordable housing, things like population, they're not new issues. The question is whether we can come up with solutions that we can then get implemented rather than talking about them for 2.5 years or 3 years. And I think it's only about then that you'll be able to judge us. I'm quite clear, I don't want sort of 20 strategies that take 3 years to produce and then suddenly you're into a year of implementation and we don't actually move that things forward. We've got to, yes, there's some planning to do, there's things to get in the right place, we've got to have that, make sure we've got that direction. But we've then got to do implementation. We've got to see actual real changes coming through that affect all of us as real people on the island.
So we're going to see some action rather than words.
That is always the intention, absolutely. Now, don't give me a time scale there because we know we've got a time frame that comes through from legally, strategic plan has to be in place by 4th of October, I think it is. Then the budget comes through straight on the conveyor belt, and then the spending plans come through. So there's actually a bit of a conveyor belt of things we have to do to get in place. But a sort of parallel to that will be hopefully when you'll start seeing some changes coming through. Some of it is already happening to an extent with the changes possibly on things like housing rents. Population, having said all that, is a much more complicated subject. We need to get the right data sorted out underneath there. So that will take some time. However, I had a conversation with the statistics department 3 or 4 weeks ago. So a piece of work that if the debate was going to go ahead in, I think it was the next sitting, so 2 weeks' time, one of the things was to request the Assembly to request the Chief Minister to go away and do a piece of work. I've set that going already. But that's going to take 3 or 4 months to get in place. So in other words, we hopefully by then we'll then see what that information looks like, and then that gives us a decent basis on which to then start putting better controls in place. But we've got to get that data sorted out first, and that's the bit that takes the time. Okay, that's good. So last question, I know we're stuck for time, so we'll have to wrap it up. Thank you greatly for affording me this interview and engaging with citizens media. Do you believe citizens media can be a force for good in holding power to account and indeed holding the mainstream media to account? Yes, and I think the short answer is, you can respond, it's always got to be done with responsibly. That makes sense. So actually your questions today have been really, really well balanced, I would say, and we've had the chance to respond, which is good. I think as long as one can keep that objectivity in there, I didn't see any issues with that whatsoever. And thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Minister.